So we're taking a little bit of a break from R because you need to spend time working on your midterm exam and you need to spend time building your bibliographic essay. So there's no homework assignment for this weekend. There's nothing in R for you to do. But I want to cover these concepts of measurement because they become very important. So this is kind of the roadmap of what we're doing when it comes to measurement. I'll just kind of use this as an example to illustrate the ideas of what we're talking about. So right now, BYU Idaho is trying to decide if they should require ACT tests for students that want to apply for admission to BYU Idaho. So recently someone did a presentation and they talked about how well ACT scores predict freshman GPA at BYU Idaho. So the question that they're trying to understand is, how well does ACT scores predict, I would imagine, academic performance? And they choose to use GPA as their measure of academic performance. But you can think of a lot of things that reflect academic performance other than your GPA. Also, you could think of ways that GPA is maybe a noisy measure to use. What do I mean by noisy? Well, if you were to take this class from 4 different professors and you were to do exactly the same work, are you going to get exactly the same grade for that work? Right? So when we talk about reliability, that's what that question would be, is reliability. Is GPA a reliable measure? If you were to take the same course from different professors, would you get the same grade? But the other thing you could think about is whether your GPA actually reflects what you've learned or your ability or your performance at BYU Idaho. Some people come into classes and all they care about is following the rubric so that they can get an A, and they care very little about whether or not they've learned any of the course materials, and they care very little about whether they've actually achieved the outcomes that the class states. Other students don't care as much about their grades, but they care a lot about learning and growing. So does GPA reflect learning in that sense, right? That's another way you could think about it. That would be a validity question. Does GPA actually measure performance, or is it measuring something else? So when we talk about measurement, and when I talk about research, whether I think it's good research or bad research, it's typically these questions of reliability and validity and how things are operationalized that matters to me. And probably what should matter to you as well. So you need to know that the data you collect represent the idea that you are trying to test, right? So validity is a way of saying that this test measures what it's supposed to measure. If I say it's a valid measure, let's say I say it's a valid measure of vote choice, it means that the measure I'm using for vote choice is an accurate reflection of who the person voted for. So that could be actually really fairly simple, except for that votes in elections in the United States are secret ballot. So we don't actually know who a person votes for. If we were in some kind of a dictatorship where we could see the ballots they cast, that's easy to measure. But if we want to talk vote choice in the United States, we have to maybe ask in a survey who they voted for. Well, they could lie about that. So that would weaken the validity of that test, right? If maybe we could tell whether or not they voted, that for sure. Voter turnout, that's an easy thing because we can just see who voted. But then again, people say there's fraud sometimes in voting, and people sign their name as if they're voting, but it's not actually, they're signing a fraudulent name and it's not them, right? So there's always going to be some degree of uncertainty in the measure that you use for your concept, but validity means that your the measure you're using tests what it's supposed to be testing. Reliability just means that it's consistent. So back to the grades example, if let's say that I want to measure how well you understand reliability and validity, and I give you a multiple choice test, or I give you an essay question test, or I give you a test that you take online, if your knowledge of these concepts hasn't changed, so you should get the same score no matter what kind of test I'm giving you. And reliability would be, is this consistent? Is it accurately, is the test, giving you consistent results. It doesn't mean that they're right, it just means that they're consistent. So when we're doing hypothesis testing, what we have is a theory where we're talking about concepts. In the case of the midterm, we're talking about how social networks influence belief in conspiracy theories. But those are concepts. Hypotheses have to move from this concept, social network, and belief in conspiracies to something measurable. So how do I know whether or not a person believes a conspiracy theory? One way is I could ask them. One way is I could feed them a conspiracy theory and watch what they do. Maybe I ask their friends to rate whether they believe these conspiracy theories, right? But whatever I'm doing to measure that concept is called a variable. Same with social network. How do I know who your friends are? When I'm talking about your friends, I could ask you in a survey. I could measure who you communicate with. I could look at your social network on Facebook, right? So the hypotheses are always stated in the variables, not the concepts. So if in the end you say my hypothesis is that social networks influence belief in conspiracy theory, no, that's not a hypothesis. It would be the social network one has on Facebook is associated with survey responses about a belief in a particular conspiracy theory, or maybe dozens of them, right, or a number of them. And then indicator is how you score. So the more friends a person has on Facebook, the less likely they are to believe these conspiracy theories, right? And that's the working hypothesis, and then the measurement. That's where you get to that. So you start with these concepts, but you got to get down to very specific measures. So this would be like an exercise we would do in class, but we're not in class, so sorry. So there's 4 kinds of measurement scales. Really, there's just categories and numbers, but it's important for you to understand the difference of nominal and ordinal data, and then ratio data, probably just numbers. So nominal is a category, but it's not rank ordered. So something like race, gender, where you live, are you employed or unemployed, right? There's no order to these things, right? Are you married, divorced, widowed, whatever? Those kinds of things don't have an order to them, so we call them nominal. They're categorical data, but they're nominal. But then you could have categorical data that's rank ordered, like what year you are in school is a category, right? Are you a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior? So it's a category, but there's some kind of a rank to that. One implies more than the other, right? Or you might ask somebody a survey question from strongly agree to strongly disagree, what they think about something. So you can put that in some kind of an order. So that would be a categorical data, but it's ordinal because it's ranked. And then these things are numbers. How old are you? So when it comes to statistics, like correlations and stuff, I always measure things in numbers when I can, because it's very easy to convert a number into a category. It's very hard to convert a category into a number. So I typically try to ask things in numbers rather than categories because it makes it easier to do statistics. But journalists and reporters and I don't know what to call these people who publish things on the internet, but these people, they like to have nice little tables that they can show you with categories. This percent of people said this percent of people said this. So they often ask things in these category things. And so when I'm using other people's data, I have to have the tools to do it, because that's the way they ask their questions. So this is, again, just going through how you go from a concept to a variable to an indicator. In class, we kind of go through it a little bit more but it's important to have back and forth to make it, otherwise it just doesn't work. So sorry, this slide isn't particularly useful for us today. So reliability measures whether a test is consistent. So there's these forms of reliability that it talks about in the book. Inter-rater reliability, we'll start at the bottom, measures if 2 people, let's say you're giving them a text to read and you want them to say how liberal or conservative the article is. Inter-rater reliability means that each person who reads that story gives it roughly the same rating. By the way, that's a very biased thing. You can't actually get a reliable measure of liberal conservative in the news, because people's own liberal or conservative views shades the way that they perceive the liberal or conservativeness of the news. Internal consistency is I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah. It's like if a concept is multidimensional. So love, there's the kind of love that you have for your mother. There's the kind of love you have for your brother. There's the kind of love you have for your girlfriend or spouse or whatever. There's the love you have for your kids, the love you have for your pets, love you have for your neighbors. There's all these dimensions of love. And so if you want to know if if your measure of love is just measuring one of those or all of those, that's what internal consistency will tell you. You can just do correlation on those. Parallel forms reliability is like what I was saying before. If you take a multiple choice test or an essay test or an oral exam, or you take the exam online with proctorio, or you take it without proctorio, you should get the same score every time on the same kinds of questions. So if you don't, then you would lack parallel forms reliability. This is another reason why GPA at BYU Idaho would be such a horrible measure and indicator of anything, because it certainly fails the parallel forms reliability test, right? I'm sure that religion has common things that they try to assess or test or find out if students know, but I can guarantee that which TA you happen to get in your religion class or which professor happens to be teaching that class will have a huge influence on whether your answers are A quality or B quality. So we don't do so good at that here. And then test retest would be like, let's say they want to know how much I weigh and they measure me today. And then let's say that they measure me in 10 minutes, and let's say that they measure me in an hour, and let's say that they measure me in 2 hours, and then a day later, right? My weight shouldn't fluctuate that much in such a short period of time. So I should be getting the same responses each time. If not, then my test retest reliability would be bad. So there's a number of things you can do to fix the reliability of a test. It's actually just really simple statistics that we're not going to learn in this class because it doesn't matter for most of you. But just so you know, reliability is easy to measure, easy to fix. If only one has the inclination to do so. Validity is harder, right? Validity is, there's no way to do a statistical test or to measure if something's valid. You just have to figure out, is this thing measuring what it's supposed to measure? So there's a number of words we use to talk about different kinds of validity. This is just even a tiny little sample. There's a whole lot more. But validity is what we argue about. And you can have something that's statistically significant. You can have something that's reliable. You can have something that looks great on paper. And you can argue with people and say, see, I've showed what I think I've shown. And they'll say, well, but I don't think you have valid measures. I don't think you're measuring what you think you're measuring. And that's the thing, you can't beat that argument. All you can do is say yes, and then they say no. So most of science is persuading other people that the measures you're using are valid, and going about it in so many different ways to persuade them that what you're doing is valid. I can use my paper I just published about where I say the media isn't biased in what they choose to cover. We say the media isn't, even though we show that reporters tend to be liberal, political reporters, they're just as likely to meet with a conservative candidate as a liberal candidate. And so the biggest pushback we get on that is they say, well, that doesn't measure. There's so many other ways that they could be biased other than that. And we say, yeah, of course, that's true. And possibly what you're saying about these other forms of bias, possibly they're out there. We haven't found any evidence of them. We've definitely found that we found no evidence that they're biased in what they choose to cover when it comes to political candidates. And they say, well, what about scandals, right? So that's a validity question. They say, you're saying that they're not showing bias in what they choose to cover, and we're saying that you haven't tested the whole universe of what they may or may not choose to cover. Or another paper I recently published where it says that Trump doesn't persuade people when he tweets. Well, that's tested in a sample of gun owners, oversample. There's more gun owners than in the population in that. And the tweet happened to be about gun-related issues. issues. And they say, well, you're showing that Trump can't persuade gun owners to support gun control, but that doesn't mean on some other issue it might not work. So that's just a validity argument, right? They're accepting that my research was done appropriately, but they think that perhaps the measures I'm using aren't valid, or at least they don't cover the whole universe of things, right? So this would be the content validity. So this is actually a fun thing to do. You can take this race IAT question, and this little thing, it has you take a little quiz where you're like putting white kids and black kids into bins and positive and negative words into bins. And in the end, it can tell you if you're racist. It's actually a really popular thing, these implicit attitude tests. It would be good for you to take that test. You could see the results. And then after you have taken the test and you see those results, you could think about, okay, is this valid? Is this reliable? This is something that's fun to do in class. It's typically how we spend the bulk of the time on this section. And then take it again. Once you get the results, take the test again and see if you get the same results. If you don't get the same results both times, that means that this test is not reliable. If the test is not reliable, it can't be valid, because if a test isn't consistent, then if your test isn't, here we go, if a test isn't consistent, it can't be valid. So it's a kind of a fun discussion to have. Usually the results show that white people are racist against black people are racist against white people. If you're of some other race, then it shows that you're typically not racist against either group. Or if you spend a lot of time with people of other races, then you tend to not be racist according to those measures. My intention isn't to tell people they're racist, right? It's just to help people think about reliability and validity using a test that you can take online quickly and easily, and it helps you to kind of think about that. So that's kind of all there is to reliability and validity. Again, I want it to be kind of short and simple this week with the statistics end, because you really need to focus on finding sources for your bibliographic essay. On Monday, the video is going to teach you how to find lots of sources really fast to kind of build up your bibliographic essay and prepare your literature review for the midterm. So for now, go through those articles and look in the bibliography and look for articles that seem like they might be about things you're interested in making your argument, right? So look for kind of some key articles, and then I'll show you how you can build a larger bibliographic essay and a larger lit review on Monday. All right, have a great day. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, call me. I'm happy to, I'm always on Campus Wire on Mondays, even though you guys don't tend to be there. I can also just visit with you some other time. Just let me know. Good luck.